Hello, this is William. I'm filling in for the LA show on Truth and News, I believe. This is the 9th day of January in the year of our Lord 2024. And LA's going to kind of be in the background for a bit, maybe through Saturday or even into next week. She's having some medical issues, and so she'll be with us when she can and she feels well enough. So she's asked me to, kind of step in a little bit and help out. So she'll be kind of trying to take care of live chat while we're running the best that she can, as Karen's got something else going on today. So, here in the United States, we've had a little bit of, I guess you could call it political intrigue. Turns out that there's been an uptick in violent political threat surges, across the country. People calling in threats to state capitals and courts and what have you, with the government doing what they do to make it hard for people to do their jobs and, I guess, waste money. Anyway, there's a lot of anger out there in the population. There was even a deal this weekend, I guess, where Jack Smith had somebody send in a false report to the police, and he had a SWAT team come to his door. So, I'm not we'll call me a major fan of Jack Smith, but regardless, nobody should be doing that to another American. An attack on one innocent American is an attack on all innocent Americans, whether it's in the country or out of the country. I think those people calling in false reports to get people swatted, SWAT teams to show up in the middle of the night, disturbing the neighbors, that's an attack on all of us, regardless of who you are. Okay. Turns out that the appeals, the federal appeals court is deeply skeptical of Trump's immunity. So who's reporting that? This is like NBC. So, if you're on the East Coast, in the I-95 corridor, and that's where your appeals court is found in the United States, and you tend to be conservative, yeah, I think they're going to be skeptical. Just saying. All right. So we have a man whose name is, I guess, Wade, or Nathan Wade. Yeah. He's a judge in Georgia. And it turns out he and Fannie Willis, the prosecutor, on the Trump case there, was fairly close. And, if you're a judge that's involved in that case, you're supposed to be a non-biased referee between the prosecutor and defense, because that's what you do in a court as a judge. And you can't really do that when you're as close to the prosecutor as, say, a fluid barrier. Just saying. Okay, so there's kind of sexual scandal going on there in Georgia. Let's hope they get that sorted out pretty quick. Now, let's talk about Trump's lawyer. He's saying that the former president, President Trump, or any president, has national powers that are pretty much unlimited. All right, so he can declare national emergency. He could even, if for that matter, you could make the argument the president can actually assassinate people if necessary. And that's true. He can send out SEAL Team 6 to not only kill an individual, but kill a United States citizen if necessary. And it's been done in the past. So I think that argument is true, but I'm not sure how that applies to the whole January 6th insurrection argument. I just don't think the two quite equate with each other. Now, until the Senate had declared the next new president, right? Trump was president until that person was sworn in. So, did Trump have the right to have that, invite his supporters to Washington and try to get them to become witnesses in the Senate, right? Go up to the upper floor, those upper seating areas, and watch what's going on. I think citizens have that right, as long as they're peaceful and obey all the rules of the Capitol and follow, the directions of the Capitol staff that, escort and help U.S. citizens around there. I think that's logical. That's fair. Now, the second he decided that there was some violence, he asked everybody to go home. And he put that out on cell phones and the whole bit. So I don't think he was negligent in any way. He had some arguments to make with regards to the election, and he wanted to get Vice President Pence to consider everything that was going on in the nation, even the Trump supporters questioning about the election, right? And possibly, cause another election so they could verify who won, or hand over the presidency, but start a request for an investigation on election procedures that were or weren't followed correctly before President Trump left office. So all of that stuff could have happened, all right? Now they call that an insurrection that happened on January 6th. Now I personally am a cold warrior. I came from the belly of the beast. I was working for the nation the day the Soviet Union fell. And I know what an insurrection looks like. An insurrection is where heavy armor starts surrounding government political buildings. An insurrection is where control of radio and television is taken over by an insurrectionist group. An insurrection is where they stop all functions of police and intelligence for a period of time. An insurrection is where they cut off all communications with the rest of the nation. That's what an insurrection looks like. There was nobody running to the TV station, to hold up news anchors. There was nobody going to the radio stations to change property ownership of them. You see what I'm saying? Government wasn't forced out of function. Really, what went on in the Senate and the House was rather, if you ask my opinion, pretty cowardly. So that's looking at it through my military mind. Okay. Now, speaking of the president and Jack Smith being swatted, let's see, if Jack Smith can be swatted, and that's not the greatest thing. Maybe the best good thing you can do is, swat that like for me right now on the channel you're on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. Now, Mike Pence's brother, he's a politician, a congressman, and he said he's not going to run for re-election, although he's won 4 times for the state of Indiana. So he's saying he's out. Now, over the weekend, I guess it was the weekend, there was major oops when 2 of our major media members, were heard on an open hot mic cracking jokes over, well, it'd be kind of a oops thing if, the former President Trump had a JFK moment. Yeah, it didn't go well. Look, kids, wherever you are, if you're media members, in a hot, contested election cycle, during election season, it's okay to be funny. It's okay to be terse. It's okay to have a sense of humor. But don't put your tail end on the line. I mean, we're talking federal prison time for a joke. It's not worth it just to be funny. So let's not do that. Bad idea. I'm sure they immediately regretted it the second they found out it was a hot mic. So that's what it is with sense of humor in our major media for right now. New Hampshire's primary support for Nikki Haley. I don't know what Nikki stands for actually, but anyway, it would be probably Miss Nicholas. Anyway, her popularity has risen to, has risen 12% over the time she's been running her political machine in New Hampshire, and may have risen all the way to, the 12% level or 15% level, but most supporters in Hampshire, 80% of the voters, turns out, are backing Trump. Now over in Iowa, the first in the nation primary, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are looking to having a big impact and defy the expectations that the news media has given them in Iowa. And at the same time, people are sharing. Judge Judy sharing endorses Nikki Haley so that she can restore America. So as long as Judge Judy is sharing, you can push a share button and find somebody to join our show. We can give them some unbiased information and, well, a little biased, but honest information, and, you know, they can have better control over their lives. So there was an individual in England who was vowing to spill beans on corruption, has been found dead. And I think it's Ecuador. There's a porn star that vowed to bring out and show some corruption in her industry, was found dead. And, you know, they vowed to expose something. Here's the thing. If you're going to expose a government, right, don't say it. Do it. If you're serious about it, just do it. If you're not, keep your mouth shut. It's a good way to die peacefully at home in bed. Well, as peaceful as you can be. And if you're going to do it, you know, make sure you set up a series of people that in the event you die, that even more information comes out, because, you know, you don't want to encourage an assassin. All right, moving on here in the USA. So according to the New York Post, more documents could be released, or the release is in development with the Epstein Island case. So what's next to come out, we don't know. I'm hearing the circus music, a major distraction. Now, according to, I'm trying to not just be, you know, military news because I'm from the military. I'm trying to just give kind of generalized news. According to TMZ, Aaron Rodgers says that he never insulted Mr. Jimmy Kimmel, saying that he was a pedophile. Oh. Who exactly is Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel? If any of you know, leave a comment in you know, our chat section or in our comment section, because I'm not sure I know these people. But I don't have a television here at home for the last, you know, 20 years. I've only been on the internet. Now, President Biden was at an AME black church, and when he called former President Trump a loser, you know, the old L sign on the forehead thing, the church went up in a roar of applause. So that happened, right? Next, we have a history theft in process. So we have Biden rewriting the history of the previous administration, and in Philadelphia, we have folks trying to erase the history of William Penn, an Amish immigrant that has a statue and I think a model of his home from when he first immigrated to the United States. And so now the revisionists have William Penn on the chopping block. So which part of history are they going to get rid of next? Because, you know, we're kind of history too. We're not the youngest folks. At least I'm not. Moving on. Turns out Iowa voters are perplexed by changes in how the election is tabulated. Or where they go to vote. It turns out that there's been some changes that are benefiting the leaders of the different parties, right? And it makes it a little harder for up-and-coming political figures in the presidential race to be as equally represented, apparently. And so the voters are a little perplexed because they thought, you know, first in the nation primary was working okay up until then. Why damage a good thing? All right, and you know, they're perplexed. I'm kind of perplexed. So, is the Supreme Court going to straighten it out so that we can elect the person of our, you know, darn choice? You know, we're not. Here's the thing for president. They're not priests. They're not here to save your soul. They're here to save your body, right? They're here to protect you to the extent they can in government. And we should have our choice to vote on whoever we want that wins our primaries in our particular political party, whatever that may be, whether it's an outlying party, or it's one of the major parties, or it's a libertarian party. Whatever your party is, you should have the right to vote for the best person who can make it through the primary process, right, for that party. And the power of the U.S. government doesn't come from the government and is handed down to the citizen. We're the only country in the world where the citizen has that right to choose, right? Having the right to choose those who would be over you and lead you is given to you, the average citizen, by God himself. All right, so you're born with the right to choose after you leave, you know, the tutelage of your parents. You become an adult. That power is then given to representatives to represent you in the government and ensure that the Constitution, financial responsibilities, protection of civil rights, all these functions happen on behalf of the people. So it's not from a king down, it's from all the citizens up. So if there's 360 million or 320 million Americans, citizens, not just people, but citizens at the age of voting, 18 in the United States. So you are a citizen, you are able to vote, and you're not a major criminal who has been involved in major felonies. You have the right to vote. You have the right to send representatives representative to make sure your military, your State Department, the CIA, law enforcement, all these things function correctly. Okay? So you are, along with 360 million other citizens of the United States, the kings and queens of your domain, whatever the domain is that you've been able to create here in the United States. All right, we don't have one king above us giving us all that power. We have one king that created us, that gave us all that power, and then we share it with the government. So that's what makes the United States kind of special, and it also makes the United States really adaptive. All right. So that's that. Let's move on. So there's a lot of talk about insurrection again. The left-leaning or the liberal parts of our country's politics are just using, the talk about insurrection as their go-to moment, why you want to vote for us instead of somebody else. Not a plan for going forward, not delineating how they're going to make it, the United States better, but just saying, we're better than this guy that did this thing, even though he wasn't convicted, and even though all of his other people were convicted of the thing we're saying he did. It's kind of a weak argument. Just saying. Okay, moving on. So we have a Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, and we also have a Secretary of Defense. His name is Mr. Lloyd Austin, General Lloyd Austin. He's a retired general that quit his job and came back to the government to fulfill a position after the President of the United States requested that he come back and serve the nation. So I think he left Raytheon. Anyway, he came back and became our person to represent the Department of Defense, the civilian cabinet member that's over the Department of Defense. And unfortunately, he's contracted or something's happened that has created a problem for him called prostate cancer. Now, we know prostate cancer people can live for a very, very long time. Okay? But is that really elective surgery? Now, if your wife loves you and wants to keep you around, I don't think it's elective surgery time. It's mandatory surgery time. So he had a quick surgery. Now, Secretary Austin has built around him a staff. I'm sure he's got generals, I'm sure he's got secretaries, and he has a chief of staff in his office. If something important for the nation had happened and General Lloyd Austin was under anesthesia or recovering from something so that his mind wasn't clear, he would contact the Joint Chiefs of Staff and notify him that, hey, in the line of success, and that Secretary Austin is, out of the picture temporarily because he's in the hospital. He had to go in on an emergency basis after surgery, and he went home. And then that information, if it was important enough to reach presidential levels would have been carried up by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the President and presented to the President.
William,
Yeah,
they said he had was for prostate cancer.
right. And I've never had that surgery. You know, I've had the gallbladder thing, and I did have an endoscopy. You know, they do it when you're a guy and you get old. You know, and they run the old camera up you. Anyways, but no, that's kind of I woke up in a chair, barely able to breathe afterwards, right? And my chest hurt like crazy the next day. And I went in to have the other end of me kind of borescope. So, why is my chest hurting? Well, after a little time to think about it, I think I passed away on it, and they had to give me, you know, a little bit of CPR to get the old ticker going, keep blood going in me. I didn't do so well on the anesthesia, which can happen. You know, you sign your life away when you go into an operation and you're going to be put under anesthesia. So they didn't break anything. I was just bruised and sore. So did something happen to Mr. Austin during that operation that was beyond the prostate because something else got involved? We don't know. We're not doctors. Any of that sort of thing could happen. And he gets home and suddenly he's in pain, doesn't understand why the pain is where it's at. And he takes a trip into the hospital, you know, out of caution. Wouldn't you do it? Wouldn't you go in under caution if you were just sore in place? You really shouldn't have been. Then there's always the theorist out there, right? That maybe he wasn't actually at the hospital. Maybe he didn't exactly have cancer. Maybe he was just someplace else in the world he didn't want somebody to know about. Yeah, I wondered. Ellie kind of popped that one up for me, and I'm just going to let that rattle around in my brain for a while. Okay, so as far as the chain of command and loss of continuity with our military, that's kind of a red herring. Uh, Now, should he have notified the Joint Chief first before he went into the hospital? Yeah, he probably did, and then said he'd gone home. But when you have an emergency and you go to the hospital, and if you go under suddenly, you don't have time, right? Your doctor calls your chief of staff and says, hey, he's asleep, and he's going to be asleep for a while. Or he's in critical care unit or whatever. That's that secretary, the chief, his chief of staff, right, to go to the Joint Chief and explain to him we have a situation. Okay. Moving on. Now here's an odd story coming out of that border craziness, kind of civil war going on between the Russian Federation and Ukraine that's happening on Ukrainian soil right now. So the Russians have taken 19,000 children, all right, and deported them into interior Russia to protect them from the combat, the damage going on in those provinces in Ukraine where they're at war. And Ukraine is saying that, only 387 of all those children have been repatriated back to the Ukraine government and given back to their parents if that's possible. So, Ukraine's very angry with Putin, and Putin has now decreed, this is interesting, that those children may be offered and conferred upon them Russian citizenship. Now, I expect that would be the older children that could possibly make their own choices, maybe 14 and above, 12 and above, something like that. Or, I don't know, but they need to be old enough to make their own decisions, right? So conferring upon them citizenship is a big deal for children. It's not a big deal for folks that become war or political prisoners in the exchange of hostilities. They may be offered the citizenship, and that's okay. You can offer the citizenship to Ukrainian military that don't want to return to Ukraine during swaps of prisoners with Ukraine. So anyway, that's going on. So that decree by Putin is very strange and concerning with regards to those 19,000 children and their parents and Ukrainian state. And if Ukraine's doing the same thing, I'm sure the Russian Federation would feel the same way. Okay, moving on. So, here's the thing. We have people that are looking for safety, right? They're saying that at our southern border. Mr. Mayorkas, the head of Homeland Security, just came out with the bombshell, statement he just made in Congress yesterday or today, that 85% of those who reach the border are allowed entry into the United States. Well, if they're going to bring them into the United States and fly them around the country and bus them around the country, why don't they give them the opportunity to fly to Russia? Because Russia is feeling like it's okay to offer citizenship right now. Wouldn't those people be in a better situation? Wouldn't they have better opportunities as a citizen rather than living someplace without citizenship for, a fair amount of their lifetime? Just saying. Makes sense to me. Because a lot of the folks that are coming here are coming from the Middle East. They're coming from Africa. Russia is a lot closer, kids. It has a vibrant economy. People are able to meet their needs and prosper currently in Russia. Why make the extra trip? Okay. And if you're willing to come clear around the country, around the globe, come to the United States, could the United States fly folks that come to its southern border to the Russian border? It makes sense to me. Anyway, that's that. Moving on. Now, with regards to Ukraine, this is actually North Korea. And Kim Jong's stern, naughty, whatever she is, sister that's competing with him, has come out and stated that they are now selling military equipment to the Russian Federation for use in, the Russian border dispute and civil war that's going on with Ukraine. That's paraphrasing it, but that's the gist of it, right? So moving on from Ukraine. Wow, time is flying. I still have a lot of different areas. Africa. So in Ghana, they've had a mystery candidate for their president, and they started calling him Cheddar. Cheddar was what he was referred to, and he was running with his mask on. Well, I guess today on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, he took his mask off, and it turns out he's a very wealthy Ghanaian businessman named Nana Kwame Bed Ayoko. It's not a bad name, I guess. I was able to kind of pronounce it. And, you know, I like the name. Moving on. Nigeria. There's a group in Nigeria called the Fulani, Fulani. And they're a Nigerian group. They're a Nigerian group of Muslims who are armed with deadly weapons, meaning AK-47s, machine guns, like squad automatic weapons. Well, they stormed a Christian town in Abuja, and apparently they've killed 41 people, basically for their religion and minorly for politics. Bad news in Africa. You know, we're seeing that a lot around in Africa. We see governments that are fairly weak, and here's, you know, I heard this on the Sean Ryan show when he was interviewing one of the people that came to visit him, and this happens to be the guy that owned BlackRock, the security organization before it was disbanded. Anyhow, the BlackRock, or was it Black? Yeah, I think it was BlackRock. Anyway, so he's saying because these governments haven't made sure that there's a good banking organization, right? So that money can be secure in your country, and having a governmental organization that ensures that property rights are maintained in the country, and have a vibrant enough economy that things can be shipped back and forth. So that there needs to be at least a main road, maybe a rail line, a port, things like this, so that the government can be stabilized, so that people can get insurance for disasters, so that their businesses aren't just wiped out, you know, their lifelong work is not just wiped out. If you can provide those things, you're not going to have the likelihood of your government being overturned. If all you have to do in that country is either suffer or take up arms for whoever you believe is making you suffer right now, that's your only possibility for a life's effort. You've thrown away your governance. It's not going to outlive you. You're not going to have a legacy. So, if you're a government in those countries, you need to make sure that there's some rights, property rights, the right to hold a bank account, you know, the right to purchase insurance, a way to get food imported or exported, farming, that sort of thing, so that people can create businesses that are sustainable. And when they have hope, not going to do anything to rock the boat. So this is to the African primarily governments that are having problems and could be toppled easily with small military forces. And, any other weak government around the world, make sure your people have some property rights, have at least some basic medical care available, hopefully, so the government can issue licenses like if you're a doctor, they can have a census, they can have rights to vote, to make sure the government protects at least a modicum of the rights necessary for your economy to flourish and give people an opportunity to have an upward trajectory with their life. We'll have a lot fewer wars if we do that internally. It's not going to save us from, border clashes, but it may save governments from internally being overtaken and causing, much more suffering and people not knowing where to turn next and creating refugees and it ends up forcing the people to go without food. This is all bad stuff. Let's not do that, okay? Moving on. Blinken in Israel. We're going to go to Israel now. So we went from Ukraine, then we went to Africa, and here we are in Israel. So I might talk about military stuff, I might not. So Blinken has been rebuffed by Israel. Why? Because he's been using backdoor channels to try to get Israel to end the Gaza war or reduce the violence or move to negotiations. So we have, Mike Pence, our previous vice president, saying whatever Israel needs, they need, right? They're our best friends in the Middle East. We should make sure they have what they need in their time of want. And we have just the opposite with the State Department, head of the State Department, trying to run back channels around the Middle East to put pressure on Israel to stop its war in Gaza. Now, Gaza attacked Israel by air, land, and sea, and they've taken hostages. That's an act of war. It's straight up an act of war. Okay? If it was just a small terrorist thing, a bomb, just something to get publicity, that's different. But it wasn't. It was an act of war. So, once war starts, it's the right of the combatants whether to continue it or discontinue it. Gaza gave Israel the right to invade it. According to the UN Charter, according to, I'm sure, the Geneva Conventions. So, that's the rules. That's just the rules. So, whether Blinken's successful or Israel's successful with their contest and, terrible violence, that's what war is, right? You commit a military attack, that's violence. And you commit that on another society, you cross the border and you wreak havoc, slaughter people, and do the things that happen in war, especially in the Middle East, and Asia. You don't have a right to expect the world's going to come to your to your political aid when you intend to have a war start in the first place. All right, moving on. Yeah, and former Vice President Pence was lauding the Israeli Defense Forces' efforts, and he noticed and heard that the Israeli Defense Forces has sustained more casualties in this war with Gaza than any other war they've had previously. So that's going on. I'm sure Israel is paying attention to what violence is going on in Gaza. Now, this is interesting. According to the Latino Studies Department at the University of Illinois, now they're accusing Israel of genocide, and they're postulating that the only way peace can come about in that war is through an interesting process. All right? They say the only way peace can come to Gaza is through a queer, radical gender. So we're talking about what are men and women, or are they men and women type thing, right? People who have certain bedroom proclivities that we don't need to talk about, you know, where the reproductive things get in the air and then aren't in the air again. And reproductive, like, you know, they think reproductive rights is to be, you know, killed in the womb, type of infanticide. And, of course, environmental justice, so that climate doesn't get too hot, and everybody's going to be all happy with the sky, because, you know, there's a lot of governments that are modifying the weather, and that's kind of like climate change, isn't it? And so we should really sustain that for as long as we can, so that the Earth stays hotter, so we can complain against it. Anyway, it makes no sense to me. This is just weird. All right? Now, I don't think the LGBT group has really thought this through. And trying to look through my notes here. I got too many papers. Ellie, I'm not even going to make it to the Middle East in general, or talk about the synagogue in New York City that the police raided because plumbers found a tunnel, and the building goes back to 1800s, and the synagogue building has been a contest between two types of Jewish, Orthodox Jewish groups. Wow. And what are those tunnels used for? They could have been dug, you know, in the 1800s. Were they using it for, you know, say the Freedom Railroad? Anyway, the group in question has a moniker that they call themselves the 770 kind of faction, and their building is, I guess, building 770 anyway. And the two different factions are kind of battling over, is Mr. Schneerson, was he the Messiah, and is he alive or dead? And at the same time, the police raid the synagogue because the plumber says, wow, this weird stuff in the wall here where I'm trying to plumb for a ritual bath for the ladies in the synagogue before they're married or bar mitzvah. I don't know. I'm not Jewish, so that's kind of what I heard. Anyway, the folks that were in the synagogue at the time didn't take too kindly to having the New York's finest suddenly come into their building with a search warrant, and were getting a little testy, turning their chairs over in protest. And one even ran out with a hammer and started beating on the wall, trying to widen the tunnel that was just being exposed because there was a small hole for water to move through, a water pipe. Yeah, big blowout in New York, but it goes back to the Middle East, right? Also in the Middle East, we have a journalist that's just been killed. He's from Al Jazeera. He had been being tracked by either an aircraft or a drone, whichever. It was still piloted, right? An individual made the call. Anyway, he was in his car, and I'm sure it was marked with press. That's what they do. And yeah, he took a missile strike. And Al Jazeera is upset about it and has brought it to, I believe, both to the news cycle and to the UN. And the Israeli Defense Force has started an investigation over it. This is not something that they want to happen ever. So, bad outcome in a war zone. Let's pray that there's, a reporter from Al Jazeera is doing Israel a favor by having good rounded information coming out of Israel. So you have people that are pro-Israel, people that are not pro-Israel, more pro-Gaza, and all the information can come out, and everybody can weigh in balance, right? What is the center of the truth here? What is the major importance of the argument here, right? And how do we fix that? So you can't fix a problem to identify it, and you can't identify it until everybody involved has brought their voice to the forefront, right? Because if you don't do that, when you make the repair, one of the sides will think that they weren't considered, and hostilities start all over again. So this Muslim journalist in Gaza was doing Israel and Gaza both a favor, right? By getting out what is going on in Gaza on the ground. That's good for the Muslim communities. It's good for the community or the nations surrounding Israel, and it's good for the Israelis. So let's hope that doesn't happen. We call that, in the business, collateral damage. It's damage that happens when you're trying to solve another problem, and mistakes get made. And when you're in a war is chaos. A war is hell. A war is where anything can happen any minute. Innocent people can get killed. So if you're going to report on wars, be sure you mark the roofs of your cars, please. Be sure that, maybe you hang the camera out the window so that the drones can get a good, clear visual shot that you are in fact a journalist, right? A Okay. Moving on to some other Middle East news that has to do with folks in Denmark. So you remember a while ago there was a lot of people coming out of the Middle East and moving to European countries, and each country in the EU was tasked with supporting a number of them. So a number of these refugees went to England, and another one went to Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Germany, all the countries of the EU. Well, Denmark, who has currently come out against multiculturalism, they want people that come to Denmark to assimilate. And in Denmark, you have a state religion, right? Not the state religion you want, the state religion the Queen wants, or the King wants. Anyhow, police were summoned to locals to go check out a local street artist. They said he was breaking a new rule, a new law, against desecrating the teachings of Quran. Not the Quran, the teachings of Quran. So, what is the actual political desire of Denmark? Is it to be anti-immigrant or anti-citizen? Or pro-citizen, pro-immigrant, or just pro-citizen and push the immigrants out? So they need to decide their track. They're confusing the rest of us. Houthis, they are right next to a strait, a choke point in the Red Sea called Bab el Mandab. And there's a strait also in the Persian Gulf. Anyway, a cruise ship was going to come from Jordan all the way around Arabia, go all the way up into Saudi Arabia, and then come back down towards Bahrain. All right? And it was going to take a period of time. That's a pretty good sail, and it's a cruise ship. I think it's one of the Norwegian companies that do cruise ships, right? So they have, it's not the super max cruise ships like they used to go to Jamaica and around the Caribbean with, but it was a fairly good sized cruise ship. They would have around 400 passengers at any one time, plus crew, and it takes a lot of crew to care for 400 passengers. You could pretty much expect one crew for every 2 passengers on a cruise ship. So the shipping company, the cruise ship company, decided it wasn't worth having Houthis fire on the ship or have it stormed by Houthis as they go through that strait and get all these people taken hostage by the Houthis. So they just turned their cruise ship around, went back to Jordan, and booked flights for all of their customers so that they could get home, rather than put them at risk because of this Houthi outbreak right now. Now, Houthi said, well, we're only going after people that have Jewish cargo or a Jewish owner or flagged in Israel or something to do with Israel, right? Well, that could be anybody on the crew. And crews change every morning. I don't know if people know that. A portion of the crew will get off and go to the land and take care of other things that need to be done for the cruise line. And they take on new crew time they come to their home port. There is no way for a shipping company to know where everybody is descended from. And if they accidentally had, for instance, a third cousin on their mother's side, right, who is Jewish, they can't know this. The Houthis could say that's what they were doing, and they've taken a ship captive, right? Right now, that was a car carrier, and they've got the crew. They call them guests, right? I'm not sure guests are appropriate because guests can usually leave when they want. And if you're hosting guests, you know, they can decide they've had all they need of you for a while. So, yeah. Speaking of Jordan, Jordan went out and smashed, I mean, their Air Force, the JAF went out and wiped out some drug traffickers that had made it into their border. So they were in Jordan, and the survivors were sent back to Syria with a message: when you're in Jordan, don't bring drugs that can harm our people. Sounds reasonable. Okay, so that's the Middle East. Ellie, do you think I should go on? What do you think, Linda? Should I go on? So we have Linda watching our show. We have Ellie, listening to our show. We have Susan. Sometimes we have Karen here on YouTube, and she runs our live chat. So we'll get to the Far East tomorrow when I have the World War III report, and there'll still be some of these, you know, interesting factoids that aren't violence immediately, war coverage. So thanks for listening. Thanks, you know, for everything that you guys do, with ideas you share with us, with the comments you share with us, you know, the banter back and forth in the chat room between friends. Thank you for all that. We really, you know, we're kind of thankful for that. And Ellie, I want to say I'm very thankful that I can contribute to your show while you're not feeling so great. That's important to me. I'm not in that great a shape either, but I'm in a little better shape than Ellie is right now. So I'm just so happy to contribute. You know, in my life, the important things are God, country, the service. For me, these are the most important things in the Constitution. And this gives me an opportunity to still contribute, try to make our country a better place. So thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate it. And I thank everybody that's come here. Please smash the like button, share with your friends. Have a good evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on the World War III report. Thank you for dropping in and being part of our news family. So, signing off, I'll say goodbye. God bless. Thank you.